My job here this evening is a simple one. My job here this evening is through you to let the population of Trinidad and Tobago know firstly what exactly it is this motion is about, to put it into context, and then, as the last member requested, provide some information to the population. Is basically repeat information, not repeat as what was said today, but repeat as to what has been said on numerous times before with respect to the stewardship of this administration in the energy sector. First of all, because listening to the debate, and I wasn't scheduled to speak, but listening to what was taking place here this evening, I asked the honourable member who is visiting us and piloting this motion to see the motion, because I was simply confused as to the type of conversation taking place. And through you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to tell the population exactly what it is this Parliament is being asked to do here today is simple. It is to provide that any class of goods specified in the resolution shall be exempt from the import duties of customs if the goods are imported or entered for use by any person for any purpose specified in the resolution. In layman's language, what we're being asked to do here today is to pass for another 2 years, from the 1st of January to the 31st of December 1st of January 2021 to the 31st of December 2022, a 2-year period, to put all of the equipment and materials and supplies imported for use in offshore petroleum exploration and petroleum operations to exempt it from customs duty. So it's simple. No customs duty to be applied for any materials, equipment and supplies for use in the petroleum sector. Petroleum here meaning both oil and gas sector of Trinidad and Tobago. So to listen to what was taking place, I was a little astounded. The reason for this is simple, but before we even get to the reason, this has been applicable for time immemorial in Trinidad and Tobago. It is absolutely not new. It was there way before the 2010 period. It was there from the time, really, when we wanted to become more competitive in the global environment in oil and gas. So the first thing to understand and appreciate is you're competing globally with every province in the world for capital by these multinational companies in the oil and gas sector. So this is a pillar that is necessary if you're going to call yourself an oil and gas province. And that's really where the debate should end. For anyone to make a suggestion that this exemption should not continue, don't use the word patriotic. Don't even suggest that you want Trinidad and Tobago to succeed. Because the first step for us to be competitive globally is that you have to allow an exemption on customs duties in the oil and gas sector for the importation of equipment and supplies. Understanding the sector, and I'm a little surprised by the contributors before, the kind of equipment that comes in on a daily basis to keep the oil and gas sector running needs to be exempt from customs duty. Can you imagine every rig coming in, every supply vessel coming in, every bag of hydraulic cement to go down the well, every bit for drilling, every pipe has to attract customs duties? Is that what the opposition is suggesting? It cannot be. So as a starting point, this is a given, respectfully. It must be a given. Because for anybody to suggest any item being brought into Trinidad and Tobago, because we don't manufacture any of these items, to compete globally, it has to be exempt from customs duty. Because the next point we need to understand, and this goes directly to the member for Mayaro, one of the questions you asked is, why is production not going up? Why we're not seeing coming out of this incentive? This is not an incentive. This is a foundation of any oil and gas province. Why there's not an increase in production in oil and gas? Again, the analogy that came back to me is not too long ago in a budget debate, we had a leader of the opposition who was a former prime minister, not even knowing the country's shareholding in Atlantic LNG. So if that is the type of emphasis placed by the opposition on the oil and gas sector, then 2010 and 2015, I understand it now. We are a mature province. These are extractable liquids and gas, meaning that when you extract every barrel out of the ground, it's not coming back. So the days when we used to produce almost 200,000 barrels of oil, then down to 150,000, then down to 100,000, there's no magic in what is happening now. We are a mature province. We've been doing this for over 100 years. It doesn't grow. The same way they thought that the dividends, the retained earnings at NGC, the $16 billion that they took out of NGC that now has hamstrung NGC so that NGC cannot even reinvest in projects that it needs to. They thought that would just continue growing. So to sit here and to listen to persons who say they have an interest in the energy sector and the type of ignorance in terms of asking why has production declined? Because we are a mature province. So for us to stay competitive and for us to maintain what they call a plateau of the production, you need to encourage the sector. We are competing globally with other provinces with a lot more natural resources than we have. So this is a necessity. And anybody to suggest otherwise, it just shows the plain ignorance and lack of understanding. Now let's get to what we came in and faced in 2010 to 2015. But before I even get there, as you talked about NGC and had the audacity to say between 2010 and 2015, NGC never made a loss. The worst gas contracts that NGC has been saddled with, the two worst gas contracts that are going to be a burden on NGC's back, and I say it here today without fear of contradiction, were negotiated by UNC governments. The first was a contract negotiated under the Basdeo Pandey administration, where they did something that is unheard of. For a downstream company, the Basdeo Pandey administration negotiated a contract giving a company through NGC an option to renew gas supply at the then price. So a price in the 90s, early 2000, late 1990s, a price of gas at that time, they said, when you're ready to renew in the future, we're giving you an option to renew at the same price. Unheard of. We took it to arbitration, to fight it, to try and break it, and didn't succeed. So now that company is getting gas from NGC at a 1990s price, sinking NGC, costing NGC hundreds of millions of US dollars. That is their legacy. The second legacy item that they talk about, the only project they negotiated in 2010 to 2015, almost sank the whole energy sector, CGCL. And ironically, it is that same CGCL deal that helped made NGC lose the arbitration I just referred to. Because of course, it being a mature province, there being no proper exploration and further production of gas projected beyond 2015, what happened is the arbitration was lost because they said, well, if you've given a new gas contract to CGCL, they did not even know where the gas would come to supply CGCL from. If you've given a new gas contract there, how could you say that you have declining gas? So the two worst gas contracts that are saddling NGC today are those two, both negotiated by UNC administrations. Let's start with that. You want to talk about the state of the energy sector. When we came in 2015, and it's a story worth repeating, there were billions of dollars of claims against the NGC because it was unable to supply the gas that they were contracted to the downstream because they weren't getting the gas from the upstream. But you know what's worse? Every single contract that they renewed, every single gas contract that they talked about. I just heard the member, I think it's from Mayaro, again talk about successful bid rounds. Every single one of those licenses, the production sharing contracts and the E&P licenses, they gave away what we were entitled to. The minister's share of gas, they gave it to the upstreamers and said, you could have it. If we had that minister's share of gas today, NGC would be in a better position. They did not put anything in a production sharing contract or an E&P license for that whole period of time that helped Trinidad and Tobago. But we came in 2015, and that is what we've been fighting for, because we refused to accept status quo. The CGCL contract, when we came in, there was a greenfield gas policy that they did as a cabinet. Secret. Nobody in the country knew about it. We, the population, had no clue. You know what that was? They basically changed the policy at cabinet. This is the opposition who is in government that say they know so much about energy. And in one fell swoop of a cabinet pen, what they did is they gave new projects priority to gas. Where were the lawyers in that cabinet? Where was the two self-appointed senior counsel in that cabinet? Because what you immediately did is you opened up the claims. Because now somebody who had a contract in downstream, all of the companies who had stood with us over time that had written contracts for supply of gas were now being told, hey, you're not getting gas any longer. The new company that we've just agreed a new contract, new plant with, they will get first priority on gas. That is illegal. It's unconstitutional. So that is the first thing we had to unravel in coming in, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And let the country remember that. The one thing that the member for Tabaquite said that was correct is the Prime Minister did not negotiate any contract. But what the Prime Minister did is he provided leadership. That is Dr. Keith Rowley, the Prime Minister, the member for Diego Martin West. And he left the negotiations up to those who have the wherewithal. But when negotiations were stuck, he stepped in, and I was there. He told the powerful people at these multinationals, I must do what I have to for the shareholders that I have, who are the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And every single meeting I've accompanied him to, whether it be in The Hague, whether it be in Melbourne with BHP, The Hague with Shell, London with BP, EOG in Houston, as the upstream companies. The Prime Minister dressed the part. He's a geologist, himself and Minister Khan. They know what they're talking about. We went into those meetings and we demanded mutual respect. Not like some of the stories you heard about the meetings that took place in London before 2015, 2010 to 2015, in hotel rooms, etc. That never happened. And what we managed to do is unravel the legacy of bad contracts. But furthermore, what we're doing and what we've done, but it has to be put in context. No matter how much they scream and cry and decry Trinidad and Tobago, we are part of a global economy. And it is undeniable and irrefutable that all of the commodity prices have crashed. In the last few months, in this year alone, in the last few months, we saw something that I don't know when is the last time it happened. People were paying in the United States. WTI is the benchmark in the United States for oil. It dropped. Minister Imbert, the Prime Minister, myself, Minister Khan were monitoring it. It went to $1. It went under $1. It went below 0 cents, which meant that people were paying people to take the oil. And that is the truth. Now we hear a Nancy story from the UNC time and time again that during their time and under Basdio Pandey, the price of oil went below. Untrue. Anybody could go and do a research as to the historical price of oil, and under them oil was never $9. So to come here and say you want to know how this is going to assist, by minimum and at minimum, what this does is it keeps us in the game. It keeps us in the global game. You want to talk about FDI? After that first trip to London and to Houston, The Prime Minister, the member for Diego Martin West, came back and announced $10 billion taken, decisions to invest $10 billion by two companies, BP and Shell. That is FDI. You then had, by a visit to Melbourne, when we went to Melbourne, BHP is a global company, but they're really miners. The petroleum portfolio is a small portfolio. What happened in that meeting in Melbourne is a conversation that took place to convince BHP to do what has not happened before, the deep water drilling, and to stand here and to listen repeatedly, them down cry, broadside, oh, broadside crash, oh, you were trying to make a big deal out of broadside. Well, if they don't know, it's a hit or miss. It is hit or miss in oil and gas. Sometimes you score, sometimes you don't. But why would they think that's the government? It's not a P&M administration that drill broadside. It's the people of Trinidad and Tobago who suffer when we don't hit gas through a BHP. But I remember seeing a photograph in the newspaper, again in that period, 2010 to 2015, with the then chairman of Petrotrin standing up with the then Prime Minister and the then Minister Energy, holding up an empty jar of oil and saying, we've scored 30,000 barrels. It's raised nothing. It has raised nothing. However, under this administration, convincing the same BHP to continue their program, there's something that is coming on stream hopefully next year called Ruby. And the Ruby project is going to produce an additional 13 to 16,000 barrels of oil a day. Great for Trinidad and Tobago. But these are the things that are taking place. So we came in 2015, CGCL, a complete disaster. One of the worst negotiations ever in the energy sector, that today is an anchor around the legs of the NGC. Billions of dollars in claims, a change in the gas allocation policy that is unconstitutional that we had to reverse. I had to go to meet with the government of Japan on a 2-day turnaround trip to convince them to ease us up and to change the contract. Otherwise, it would have sank the whole industry. Not a single downstream negotiation of a contract during that term. All of that is being settled, but settled in very difficult times, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Because right now, in the global energy economy, the global economy of energy, commodity prices have gone down. When prices were being negotiated...
Remember, you have 2 more minutes.
Thank you very much. When prices were being negotiated based on ammonia and methanol, at the time, the methanol price projection was over $400 a ton. We have faced $150 to $180 a ton. So it's not a P&M administration. In fact, this administration has done tremendously well just to keep it afloat. On a weekly basis, Minister Khan and myself are interacting with the boardrooms away to convince them to do their turnarounds. They would have been thrilled if Train 1 shut down. They don't even know the shareholding of Train 1. They didn't even know that there was also a shareholding in Train 4. All they do is stand up, make up things whilst they're speaking, complete lies, fabrications, untruths, and they want Trinidad and Tobago to sink. And I take umbrage to that. Right? If NGC still had that $16 billion, they would have been in a better position today. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in closing, there is not a single honest parliamentarian who understands anything about the energy sector that can raise any objection to this motion here today. Because this motion is necessary, and all it is doing is the same thing that every oil and gas province in the world has, which is no customs duty on the importation and use of equipment and supplies in the energy sector. So I say through you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to come here and to listen to what we've listened to and to anticipate the next speaker as well, who knows nothing either about energy, is a great disgrace. And I thank you for the opportunity.